2, 1.
Good afternoon. Today is October 15th, 29th. And the day is just escaping me here. October 29th, 2018, and it's about 2 minutes after 5 p.m. And this is the Streets and Sidewalks Committee. I am the chairman, Bob Phillips. To my left is Councilman Brock Heath, and to my right is Councilman Bill Lutz. We have 4 items on our agenda this evening, and I just want to announce right up front that our discussion here this evening and public comments and that sort of thing are restricted to the 4 items that are on the agenda. This is not open for general public comments about other issues or items that will come up before this committee or council as a whole, because we get into conflicts and reporting to news media about the agenda beforehand and that sort of thing. So we want to stick strictly with the items that are on the agenda, and I appreciate your patience with that. And now, starting off with item number 1, we have a recommendation regarding 2 downtown parking programs, and Mr. Titterington or Mr. Davis is going to lead off on this. By the big question mark on your face,
Thank you. The city does want to propose 2 parking programs. Back in 2016, we commissioned a parking and traffic study to analyze the parking conditions in downtown. And as we've been making changes for that, last year we had the road diet, some other things have come from that, and now it's time to take on 2 items they recommended. The first one is the, the amnesty program. It's also sometimes referred to as the first time forgiveness program. What this program would do, it helps educate motorists not familiar with our downtown rules and regulations. So if somebody would park in a time-spaced, say a 2-hour space, and they exceeded the time frame, came back to their car and received a ticket, had they spent $25 in the downtown, they could take that receipt or a combination of receipts totaling $25 to the police department to have that ticket waived. That's one of the things we wanted to do, and once again, that is to encourage and not hurt people coming downtown to shop. It's to encourage them to come down and then educate them on the rules and regulations. This would not apply to people in handicapped spaces, or if they parked, say, outside of a line. It's strictly on the timed spaces. It's what that would be for. The $25, we would allow these qualified uses, qualified purchases, which are pretty much any goods and services that are within the amnesty business area, which the map was attached to the packet, which is essentially bounded by Water Street on the north, I think Monroe Street to the west, I believe along the railroad tracks on the east, and Ray Street to the south. So we took where all the 2-hour parking spaces end and drew a square around them to come up with the area. So the qualifying purchases are pretty much anything from the stores that are within that area, with the exception of like American Visa prepaid credit cards, things of that nature, where we wanted to make sure the money was being spent in the downtown and not something purchased downtown spent elsewhere. So that's kind of the amnesty program. What would happen is when a ticket would be issued by our parking control officer, on the outside of the envelope would have the rules and regulations of the amnesty program. So the individual who would receive that ticket would be able to see what the program is and what they needed to do to have that ticket removed.
I'm sorry, the information for that is on the citation itself?
It would be on the citation itself. Yeah, the envelope the citation comes in. Mm-hmm.
Anything else from staff?
That's just the amnesty program.
Okay.
I was going to break them down, so I didn't know if you guys had any more questions on that. I can move on to the placard program if you like.
Well, let's stop with that one so we don't have to bounce around. But gentlemen, questions that you have on that particular item?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I've got a few questions on that. Is it just one time per license plate, or how are you tracking?
Yeah, it is one time per license plate. So the police department is in the process of purchasing software that would be able to track that. So if you actually had 4 vehicles to your family, each of those vehicles could receive an amnesty, as long as the license plate is different.
Okay. Is there any max on how far they go over before it's not waived? So let's say they go over by 12 hours and they come back the next day, they still, if they paid $25, they still get it waived?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lutz, any question?
Or have other communities tried this, and do we know how successful those results have been?
We did search for other communities doing this. We did not find any in Ohio. We did find a lot of tourist communities, Fort Myers Beach. We did reach out to them, and of course, they're in a different situation than we are, but it does the same thing. What it does is it helps educate visitors to the town without punishment, which is what we're looking for.
Do we have an idea of how many parking tickets are issued to out-of-town individuals on a yearly basis? A third, a half, three-quarters? Any idea?
Joe, would you happen to know?
I don't have the numbers readily available right now, but we can
Okay.
probably get that for you if you need it.
I have no further questions at this time, but I might later as the discussion moves on.
Thank you. We're talking about strictly one forgiveness per license plate.
That's correct.
So for a family use of a vehicle, say we had mom, dad, and maybe a couple of young drivers, or a relative that borrowed a vehicle to go shop or do other things, that we wind up with 2 in a year, just to pick a number. Different driver, and we're punishing, or we're excusing the car, but we're punishing the driver, the person that's the shopper. So there's no way that we can track that off of a parking ticket, because the ticket's not issued to a person, it's attached to the vehicle.
Correct, and it was tracking to make it easier. We did, I think it was Fort Myers, they recommended we go with the license plate as opposed to the individual, because then we don't actually know, when we're issuing the ticket, we don't know who's in the car. So Brock could say it's not him, it's his mother, father, whoever. We would have no idea when we issue the ticket because the car is empty.
This might be directly to Captain Long, but how much time does the police department spend in dealing with parking citations, taking money and other things at the counter with the staff there?
I can't give you a specific amount of time. We do have a drop-off out front for that. I don't have a specific amount of time that we deal with that, but 4 or 5 times a day, maybe more, sometimes less.
With the police department being the record keeper of this sort of thing, how are we going to give an envelope so folks can, how are they going to attach a copy if they've got, just come from the store with a receipt, that sort of thing? I mean, there's a lot of administrative headache that I can see with this.
Well, it would essentially being them bringing the receipt to the store. They would have 72 hours to come, and that period is open for 72 hours. So if you were in a rush, when you got your ticket, you could come back the next day or the day after to show the supporting documentation that you did purchase $25 worth of items from the downtown.
Okay. Any negativity or positivity from the police department side that you can see, Captain?
Right now, I don't see any negativity. I think I still have a little bit of the same questions you have. How's it going to work? Because it's brand new to us also.
Right. Okay, thank you, appreciate that. Any other thoughts spurred off of that?
Not at this time.
Okay.
I think the only maybe statement or question would be, I know that a lot of the downtown businesses are very aware of how often that turns over, and that's been not a struggle or an issue, but just something that they're pretty aware of. If this gets out, the only concern would be, hey, I can go downtown and leave my car all day as long as I buy $25 and I'm clear. I don't know how many people would take advantage of that type of thing.
I think we still have other rules that would apply to that as well. I think
Okay.
cars being parked in the same spot for 72 hours at a time, things of that nature could be towed and removed. So
Yeah.
we would actually use those ordinances to enforce that instead of the
Right.
amnesty program.
Mr. Heath, they'd only be allowed to do that once.
Yeah, and I don't see a lot of people becoming aware of this and taking advantage of it and saying, hey, we've got a free day if we spend $25.
I would hope not.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, all right, let's move along to the next item. Placard program or whatever you have there.
All right, so the placard program is intended to provide dedicated off-street parking spaces and try to clear up some space on the street. If you recall, in the parking and traffic study, they had a survey that went out to a lot of the downtown businesses, and their main topic was parking and the lack of. So this is an attempt from staff to free up parking spaces. To kind of not go into a whole lot of detail, but to kind of just give an overall view, and then we can go into detail in a little bit. We would take two existing parking lots that we have, the South Cherry Street lot, which is right by the FIT, and then the South Walnut Street lot, right across from the Presbyterian Church. We would have the South Cherry Street lot, we would have 45 spaces in it. Of those, our plan at this point would be to have 40 of those become a placard space. The placard space would be a space that is available through an application process. We're working with Troy. We would work with Troy Main Street to allocate those, but you would sign up for a space which would be $300 a year, and the spaces would be marked. So if you wanted a space in the South Cherry Street lot, we get the applications, we'll number each lot. So South Cherry Street lot 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you put in your application, you could be assigned space 1. That would be your space. So for $300 a year, you would have that. The city would reserve the right to close down the parking space for needed repairs. If there's a major event, the Strawberry Festival, something of that nature, we would just give advance notice to those users of that program. With the Cherry Street lot, if we did it with the 45 spaces, we would leave 40 would be placard spaces, 5 would remain as 2-hour spaces, and then the 2 handicap spaces would remain. It was recommended by Wolpert to leave those 5 spaces for residents and others who do utilize the businesses off of South Cherry Street there that may want to just park for convenience rather quickly than make it all day. Currently, our ordinance calls, if you want to have a spot in the kiosk lot, it's 2 hours a day, or it's $2 a day for all day. What we did to come up with the $300 a year is we took 20 business days throughout the week, which would have been $40, and since you're buying in bulk, we tried to reduce that down, and it comes out to $25 a month. So that's where that number comes from, to have those spaces. The South Walnut Street lot currently has 58 spaces in it. 30 of those would be placard spaces. The other 28 would be police department spaces. So we'd have a total of 70 placard spaces that would be available for purchase for downtown business owners, residents, and employees of the downtown. And once again, it is the intent of the program to open up prime parking spaces within the downtown while offering those 3 individual categories to have a dedicated parking space where they wouldn't have to worry about driving around finding a spot. They would have their own personal parking space. There would be an application process, as I talked about. It would kind of be a complaint-driven program. So our parking control officer would be going through the parking lots, but I'll just pick on Nicole since I know she's in the room. If she rented a space for her place at Troy Main Street and she pulled in and somebody was illegally in her spot, we would have the other 5 spaces that are 2-hour. She could call the police. They would come out and address the car that's there, maybe while she parks in the other 2-hour space. We would let her be while we had the option of ticketing the car or towing the car with the ordinance. And then, like I said, it would be complaint driven. We're not going to spend all day in the lots looking for it, but if there's certainly an issue, the police would be called. And then we also put some language in there that says that we have the right to revoke some of the placards for repeated violations if Bill rented a spot and he kept parking in a different spot. So those are some of the items that we had for the placard program. So I'm happy to entertain any questions you have.
And I assume you did talk to Troy Main Street and/or Chamber, or all of them, and were individual business, were they tasked with tallying up the total number of employees or vehicles that are there, or potential numbers of uses that would come into play?
So we did solicit some businesses. We asked if this would be of interest to them. We did receive some positive feedback. A lot of it was somebody at a restaurant where their cooks or something are constantly going in and out. maybe they would rent some spaces for them. Also, a lot in the 405 building is kind of where we walked up and talked to those individuals, because there's a lot of businesses up there that don't have any parking spaces now that may utilize a lot of the on-street parking. So we did solicit that and did get some positive feedback.
And the placards would be for sale to residences also for long-term parking, or is this just 8 to 5?
Correct, it is theirs 24/7, with the exception of the times that the city needs to have it closed down.
And 70 placarded spaces on Walnut and 40 on Cherry, is that the
No,
number?
it was 30 on Walnut and
30
40 on
I'm sorry.
Cherry, 70 total.
70 total, gotcha, all right, thank you. John?
Yes. Please.
Sorry, go ahead.
Good, good. The placard is something they hang it over their rearview mirror?
It would be hung in the rearview mirror. Mhm.
Okay, and so they would be able to transfer that to another car, like, hey, here, let my sister borrow it, and she comes in and parks in my spot. As long as I've paid for that spot, I can do with the placard as I will.
As long as you have the placard, yes.
Yep, okay. And the application process, can you talk a little bit about that? Is that a yearly, they come in?
So it would be yearly. Our goal would be to start it, if it does move forward, in April of next year. We'd have an application process starting at the end of February.
Okay.
That way we can collect that, and then it would be a one-time, it'd be an annual program. We made it
Okay.
annual the first time because it's the first time for a program. I'm sure it'll have to have tweaks and upgrades like anything else. So it's kind of a start for us, and so we wanted to leave it as a year as opposed to having it quarterly where we're constantly moving around. We wanted to make sure we had time to evaluate it to make some good upgrades if need be.
Yeah. And it's basically a first come, first serve. If a business says, I need 15 spots for my people,
We would actually limit it to 4,
Okay.
depending on the applications we get. Obviously, if there's a waiting list, we would limit it. We settled on 4 because several businesses talked about wanting up to 4. We didn't want to go higher because we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to get some. So we didn't want to sell everything. So say if,
to one business?
if Tom
Yeah, yeah.
Funderburg started a business and he wanted to rent all of them, we would want to prevent that, of course.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are the placards transferable, or if I no longer need the spot, do I have to surrender it to the city?
It would be yours for the year.
Okay. So I could conceivably sell it to another individual for the remaining of the year?
Kind of like scalping.
You,
Placard scalping, yeah.
Placard scalping?
I guess you could.
Okay.
Or they could just come to the city and get it for the same price, but yeah.
Well, no, I mean, if there's a waiting list and you've run out of the 70 allocated spots, and I've got one of these things now, and I realize that
If
I
that,
could sell it to somebody else if it's worth the convenience.
if that
to me.
became an issue, we would certainly change the program after the year and
Okay.
revise the program to prevent that from happening. So we would probably line up individual cars you would have to write down on your application process, and then we'd have that list that you'd have to stay within, is probably what we would do.
Okay.
And is the fee payable up front, or is this a monthly installment?
It's payable up front. There would be no refunds as well.
So as the policies have or have not been written,
The policies have been written.
so as you've written them now, which we have here, I don't see anything about refunding if somebody took it for 6 months, half the year, and pass it on to the next person in line on the list or anything.
If-
That they have to do that on their own, or is that going to be an administrative issue that we're going to?
We would certainly ask them to come back if they weren't going to use it again and try and do that. We could also do a prorated item if we wanted to. So if you had it for 6 months and somebody moved in later and we had spaces available, we could always work on that. Like I said, we wanted to see how the program ran first before trying to make all these case scenarios.
Yeah, I think some flexibility is needed because, customer service is what we're about here.
Right.
And trying to make it easy for folks. Okay, any other questions on this?
No, thank you.
Next item.
And lastly, just to go over some of the other changes, because they were kind of tied in. If you go back to the memo, I'll just go down the bulleted points. The first one is, of course, the creation of the placard program. The second one was the amnesty program we talked about. The third one was to increase the parking fines. We were talking about having that, but that wouldn't start from $20 to $25. Currently, it's 20. We would make a recommendation that increase to $25. That would not start until the year 2020. Once again, that gives us time to evaluate the programs that we have introduced. Also, it would help offset some of the costs of running these new programs, which is the main reason for the fee increase. Additionally, we had language changes to 331.12, which was to prohibit J-turns. So these are some more of the traffic side of items. When we altered the lanes downtown from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, our language needed updated, so that's what that language does. It basically prevents it on 2-lane roads. We also had one that talked about, we wanted to strengthen some of the language on vehicles when they're parked outside of the white striped lines. So it's just a proposed language. I think it's a small paragraph just to strengthen that up. And then the last change was highlighted to put some enforcement on front end and back end parking. So we added language that states that when you are doing front end or back end parking, that your tires be no further than 12 inches away from the curb or roadway. And those were highlighted in there, proposed by the police department and reviewed by Grant Kerber, our law director. And then from the items, we talked about the parking study, the items in the parking study, the items that we are not recommending at this time, because there was a list of items that they suggested. I just wanted to go over these shortly. It was the installation of kiosks in the downtown quadrants. We are not proposing to have that done. Reconstruction of the North Cherry Street parking lot at Water Street, we're not proposing any changes to that. Construction of a parking garage. The ordinance language to prevent space hopping, we're not moving forward with that at this time. We want to see the effects of this program before doing anything with that. And we talked about increasing the time to our space, but we want to see, once again, how this program affects the traffic patterns that we've already studied to see the differences before making any recommended changes to those.
Have there, and I know we've talked about this, but I haven't had this particular question answered. Do we know how many county parking spaces or how many county employees are taking up on-street parking?
So we did reach out to the county. Actually, we had Joe Long reach out to the county, and I believe they are 40 employees that do not have assigned county parking spaces.
Okay. What are we spending per year on our parking enforcement person?
So the revenues from parking control go into 2 different funds, parking meter fund as well as the parking and downtown improvements fund. There's a split, I don't remember what percentage it is. Overall, our revenues are about $49,000 a year. In 2018, we also had a $25,000 subsidy from the general fund, a transfer that went in, so that would be $73,900. Taking out the wayfinding one-time capital project, if you will, between the 2 funds, our annual costs are $88,880. So there was a $14,920 fund balance reduction, if you will.
So the 88 includes that or is minus that?
The 88,880 is the annual, or the 2018 appropriated expenses.
But that does not include the 14,000 wayfinding?
That's, no, the 14,920 is just the difference between the expenses and the, all the resources that I mentioned.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
So that meant it came out of fund balance. If I can elaborate on a couple of the items that Tim mentioned, just to give you some of the background. So when we had the work session and we talked about all these items, and that's why we bulleted what we wanted to do, but what we were going to defer. The ones that we are deferring are those that there was a consensus of council several months ago now to move forward with, but after further analysis and trying to vet out the different programs and talking to Troy Main Street, we narrowed it down. And so we're deferring those bulleted items. I believe there are 6 of them that we're recommending not to pursue at this time. One of which, in discussions with Troy Main Street, there appears to be a lot of excitement in the placard program. And as we move forward, we're hopeful that there'll be a lot of demand for that. And by moving those employee vehicles, those normal vehicles that are downtown, away from central downtown, the feeling is that there could be some freeing up of spaces in the core, especially in the core downtown. When I say the core downtown, I mean from the quadrants 1 block out on Main Street and on Market Street. And so for the next 6 months to a year, depending on how quickly the placard program rolls out, as we go through the various seasons, we will be surveying through our parking control officer, just doing counts of how many vacant spots are we seeing at what times of day. Is there some flexibility in perhaps changing the time spaces, increasing the times, for example, it's from the 2 hours to something more. Because we don't know how successful the placard program is, and because we don't want to do any changes, those are administrative changes. We're not asking for any legislation because it's not a legislated item as far as the timing, the time spaces go. But, we want to see how many spaces may free up. And if that happens, then we can consider changing the timing. So while the council, by, I think, almost unanimous, maybe not unanimous, but by consensus, had agreed to increase the fees, the fine fees from the $20 to $25. We are recommending that we defer that until 2020. Once we have a chance to evaluate and see where we're at, and then propose within the fee schedule whether or not we should do any changes to the parking fees at that time. So we're not recommending an immediate change to the parking fines, and it's so that we can evaluate how many spaces are we freeing up, how much turnover are we seeing, are we seeing the kind of space utilization after the placard program as we do now. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Any additional questions on this, any of these 3 points? Placard, amnesty, and the increase in parking fines.
Excuse me for sounding possibly too obvious, but if we're generating an extra $21,000 of revenue through sale of placards, why do we need to increase parking fines $5?
We're hoping to generate $21,000. We don't know actually how many placards will be sold. That's why we're deferred it off to 2020 to see if adjustments need to be made. That's the reason for having the fee increase. We wanted, A, to bring it to your attention that it would be coming, and B, we don't know the effects of the program on what we will collect.
Do we have any idea of how many placards we could sell?
Well, we know we would be able to sell 70.
Well, I mean, from the conversations that have taken place, I mean, have we identified 70 placards to sell at this point?
Did not identify 70 to sell. We didn't go to every business either, so we don't know. There's definitely some questions that we're going to have, and it's kind of a wait and see who applies for and what the demand will be.
Was Troy Main Street involved in that questioning, asking the businesses, or did you just, I heard you say you went to the 405 building?
Yeah, we went to several different
site.
buildings. I don't know what Nicole has, and I don't speak for her.
Ms. Loy, if you would come on up for just a moment, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot,
But while she's coming up, Mr. Lutz, you're talking about generating another $21,000 in maximum revenues, if
Correct.
those fees would be increased. against right now, we're spending $25,000 out of the general fund to subsidize this program. So we already have that subsidy. I'm not saying that's the reason we're doing it. We will have some more administrative costs between the police department, staff, as well as assistance by the Troy Main Street, but that's one of the reasons why it might make sense. But that, again, that's not a decision that would be made until the 2020 fee schedule, not this year.
Right.
Well, then I guess I'm confused because it looks like we're changing the ordinance, right?
We would not be,
With the information that we received, it appeared that the red is a change, correct?
The placard and the amnesty are an addition.
Correct. And then
And then
that,
the fee
and the fee is
is
also
a change.
changed. So when does that ordinance come into effect?
we would not pass that ordinance right now. It would be part of the 2020 fee schedule. So this, you're talking about attachment 4, the penalty?
Correct.
Yeah, so that we would not be putting it forward to you at this time.
So what exactly are we recommending to council to act on
Future.
Next
in
week.
in next week or within the month or whenever?
To implement the placard program, to implement the amnesty program, to prohibit the J-turns, or clarify that language, to clarify the language that you have to park between the white lines, to also clarify that if it's a head-in parking spot, then your front right tire needs to be touching the curb or within
12
6
inches.
inches of the curb.
12 inches.
I believe that's it.
So pretty much everything except attachment 4.
Correct. That would be done with the fee schedule of 2020.
But we are acting on it now, but staying that implementation on the fines until 2020.
Correct.
So, okay.
So you're basically saying there will be no change in the fines at this point in time?
Right.
So, just to be clear, section 35199 of the ordinances that we may be asked to adopt within 30 days, that will not change, or will that change?
That will not change.
I'm sorry, Ms. Loy. Have you have been in discussion with this parking issue for the last, how long have you been here now?
1 year.
I know that this has been on your plate, or you've been around it, but what is your sense of businesses, particularly with the placard program?
Sure.
If you have an answer to that.
Regarding the placard program, we did work alongside the city to send out a survey via email to business owners, building owners, and I have those results here for you to see.
If you give those to Mrs. Knight, please.
So there are 3 pages, Sue. So the first one is the written responses. The next 2 are the graphics to help you see what percentage each one is. Of the graphics, they're divided between downtown property owners and downtown business owners. So that'll give you a better sense of who is more interested in the placard program, and the questions that were asked included, are you interested? If yes, about a pay structure, things along those lines. So the downtown property owners, 66.7% of the respondents said that they would be interested in participating in a placard program. And the monthly fee of $25, which would total $300 per the year, all of them said that that would be reasonable. If you look at the downtown business owners, it's more divided. So you will see that the majority of the business owners who responded did say that they would be interested in participating in a placard program at 56.5%. 17.4% said maybe, and 26.1% said they were not interested. There's also questions about how many spaces they would be interested in utilizing. The property owners did not answer that question. That's why you don't see it in the graphics. They were asked, but they did not respond. And then on the second page, it asked if a monthly fee of $25 would be reasonable. 55% said yes, 45% said no. And those who said no to that question responded with a dollar amount or a written response, which is why you have the packet with the written responses. As you can see with the bar graph, some of the responses were free, some said depends on the location, so on and so forth. So you can read their written responses to see exactly what those answers were, if they did not give a number for the answer.
Okay. And how many businesses did this go out to?
It went to all of the businesses, but as you can see from the graphics, there were 23 respondents from business owners and 6 downtown property owners responded.
And how many total are the businesses or the email, what's the total of the list that you send out?
Yeah, so I can't give you an exact number without looking at my computer system,
Ballpark.
but typically it's about 100.
Okay, got it. So we got about 25%, a little over 25% response. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Didn't know this information was coming, but that's outstanding. That's great. I'm going to open it up to any other council folks that might have a question on this. If you do have a question, please come up to the microphone and fire away so staff can answer. No one? Okay. The chair recognizes Mr. Schweizer from Ward 3.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. So, let me understand. The citizens have paid for the parking spots that are there now. We're now going to sell those parking spots to whoever wants to buy them for $300. Is that right? So Cherry Street parking lot, out of the general fund or out of the capital improvement fund, we have paid for those parking spots.
Those spots in the Cherry Street lot are kiosks, so they do require metering. So while they've paid for the general creation of those spots,
And the
they've
maintenance.
had an ongoing fee associated with them. The Walnut / Mulberry Street lot, in this case, the Walnut Street side, it's been I won't say a neglected, it was long overdue to be renovated and was just finally renovated out of the general fund, yes. We have, as part of that renovation, we were looking at these various ideas and it coincided with the parking study.
So the potential $21,000 in revenue that we get from the placard program, where will that money go? Into what fund will that get
Well,
channeled
that
into?
would, unless the policy or I'm not sure if it's an ordinance or just a policy, I know it's built into the budget process. A portion of it goes into the parking meter fund. Is it 75%? We're not sure. It's a portion that goes into the parking meter fund, and then the other portion goes into the downtown parking improvements fund.
And that would be for the repaving and the striping and snow removal and things like that?
And capital projects that might be involved therein, yes.
Yeah, because if the citizens aren't allowed to park in those parking spots, I would be uncomfortable telling them that they're going to have to pay for the maintenance on those parking spots. Do you follow me? No.
Well, yes, I follow you, but I guess the best way to answer that is that we would not be taking those revenues and putting them into the general fund.
Okay,
They would stay with the two downtown parking-related funds.
Okay, that's all I want. Thank you.
Mr. Seaver.
Thank you. I just really have a question more for Ms. Loy. She talked about the placard system, but she didn't talk about the amnesty program. And I don't know if she gathered any empirical data relative to how Main Street feels about the amnesty program. But she talked about one. I just wanted to know if she did any investigation on the other, or Main Street's opinion with regard to that.
If you have an answer, fine. If you do not,
Yeah, I have more papers for you guys.
Oh,
So, we did not do a survey in regards to the
I can see
amnesty
another meeting
program in
coming up
general.
behind this, you know that.
We didn't do anything regarding the amnesty program specifically, but we did in August send out a downtown parking survey in general, just to see what the general feelings were of parking, if they thought there were issues, if so, what they thought the most pressing issue was, so on and so forth. Regarding the amnesty program specifically, some of these suggestions were to include an amnesty program, but I would be happy to give this to you as a whole. The majority of people who responded said that the biggest issue with parking is the time limit. Sorry, I'm trying to make it easier for you to hand out too. So we had 27 responses. This was a walking survey. So I went to each of the downtown businesses, and if there was someone available and willing to take the survey, that's who did. So we had 27 respondents at that time. They took the survey via our iPad, so everything's still anonymous, but it was submitted immediately. We had a mix of business owners, building owners, employees, and residents, some of which encompassed all three. So when you see these numbers, you'll see that maybe there were more than 27 responses because someone could be a business owner, a building owner at the same time. So the responses regarding the biggest issue with downtown parking was that there were not enough spaces for visitors, not enough spaces for employees, not enough spaces for residents, 2-hour parking time limit is not enough, or I do not believe there's a parking issue. 81.5% of the respondents said that the 2-hour parking limit is not enough time. That was the biggest concern. The not enough spaces for visitors or for employees were at 44.4% and 48.1% respectively. The written responses that you'll see gave some of the responses that were written instead of multiple choice. So you'll see any responses as to a positive parking experience I've had, a negative parking experience I've had, and then the suggestion to fix any parking issues I feel there are include, and you see the responses there. So for Mr. Sievert, the amnesty program was suggested, and that's where this comes into play, but there are also lots of other great suggestions as well.
Okay. Do you have any other information that you brought to provide us this evening?
Any other documents? No, but if you have any other questions or something comes up, I might pop up again.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Any other, Mrs. Baker, President, Council, anybody else, city staff, or anybody have questions? At this point, I'm going to open it up to public questions about particular items and that we've just talked about. So if there are any questions out there in the audience, please step to the microphone, identify yourself, name and address, please, and ask your question.
Hello, I'm Lori Reiser, 10 West Main Street. I'm with Winans Chocolates and Coffees. I may have been the one that gave an amnesty idea to the city because I got a parking ticket in Clearwater, Florida when we were there on vacation, and they left me a really nice note saying, "We see you're from out of state. If you can provide a receipt that you spent $25 in our city, we will take that ticket away." I think what they realized in implementing this is that a lot of people don't keep their receipts because they gave you 60 days to prove that you had spent that much money, which I needed because I had to wait until I got my credit card bill and make a copy of it and send it to them. So I think it could be really frustrating for people visiting if they didn't keep their receipt and they're only given, 2 or 3 days to provide that information. Also, I think it would be really nice to allow people to mail in their receipts. Because I just think an elderly person would be not comfortable walking into the police station, especially if they're from out of town. And I think it would serve the purpose. It would maybe take a little bit longer time frame, but I think it would be a little friendlier approach. And then my question is, if the Cherry Street lot is pretty much totally taken up with placards, then where is anybody going to park that's coming downtown and knows they're going to stay longer than 2 hours? I think we have a lot of customers that use that lot because they'll come to our place, they'll go to a meeting, then they'll go to lunch, and I know our employees use it, my husband and I use it, so does that mean we're going to have to park several blocks out because there will be no long-term parking close in? Or am I missing something?
Well, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but there would be 5 total spaces. Now, is that inclusive of the handicapped?
It would be 5, yeah, the 2 handicap would remain, and then the 5 spaces would be available for 2-hour parking.
Yeah.
And so the South Cherry, we're talking about the South Cherry lot, is usually underutilized when the kiosk is working. When the kiosk is not working, then it tends to be at 100%
Yeah.
occupancy. Go figure.
Yeah.
So we have looked at and have modified, or at least in the process of modifying, if we haven't completed it, changing some of the spots as you go a block out and trying to be a little more clear on which ones are 2-hour and which ones are untimed, if you will. So I think we've grown that population of untimed spaces as you move away from the downtown. So you might be a block or 2 blocks away, but it's not that far away. And I think we've pretty much finished that, right, Tim?
Yes.
And it seems to be working so far.
Okay. Did that answer everything for you?
Yes.
And I actually have a question, Mr. Chair. Mrs. Reiser, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I loved hearing about the perspective of being a customer or a client with the amnesty period suggestion. Do you mind flipping over on the other side and talking about it from a business owner standpoint, how you view it from that side? You think it'd be a good thing or not?
I think it's a nice thing to have. The thought of raising the ticket price is, I have to say, rather appalling to me. The first time I got my first $20 ticket, the first word that came to my mind was kind of like, how arrogant. I mean, to think that a small town would charge a $20 parking ticket. And I just think if it went to 25, I'm just afraid people will get mad and never come back. Yeah, but I think the amnesty program is nice. I mean, I smiled when I got that. It was like a note on my card. It wasn't actually a ticket, but they could tell I was from out of state. And I think that's a friendly thing to do. I think it is a way to kind of put people on notice. Yeah, I like that.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And especially if they can mail it in, because my fear would be they would come back in the store and say, I didn't get a receipt. Can you create one for me?
No.
And then that kind of puts our employees into a tough situation because they can't really do that.
Right.
And a lot of folks do get email receipts and that sort of thing, or
Right.
and then lose things, or have to wait for the credit card statement.
Right.
Just on a personal level, I just want to thank and congratulate Winans for all the things you do for our community.
Oh, thank you.
Just in general.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else?
Hi, Brian Kemper. I live at 1013 South Crawford. On the amnesty thing, one of the first thoughts I thought of is a lot of people, maybe 2 or 3 people in a car get different receipts at different places, some by text. Almost every place I go downtown, I either get a text or an email receipt. So figuring out how to get those and if those are considered documentation if they go in. I think the mailing in and having a longer period that she mentioned definitely would be something better for that. Maybe even if it's an out-of-town plate, a notice on their car without a ticket saying, hey, this is our rules. If your plate is ran again, it will get a ticket. That might even be a better thing where they get a free pass one time by the plate being in there. But with the parking, the South Cherry Street lot and the lot behind where Purebred and Trojan City Music, with all the residents that live on South Cherry Street, it's already an issue during the summertime, spring, summer, and early fall, with them relying so much on that South Cherry Street lot to park on weekends because of the farmer's market. Most of the residents that live down there have to move their cars on Friday nights into that lot and stay there Saturday. And many of those spots are even taken up on Saturdays by the farmer's market. So would that also be something that like the city can then, people who bought a placard lose their spots every Saturday to farmer's market traffic? That's something that might be addressed because there's many parking spots that are marked during the farmer's market as no parking on Saturdays. But then also all the people that live on South Cherry Street, I have a building there, that rely to be able to move their car there on Friday night so they can park. That there's a single mom I know, who lives in our building. If she had to park 3 blocks away with her little girl, it's quite a bit of a hassle to that. They rely on that lot for that. As a customer of downtown businesses, I spend, and a couple business owners here could attest to this, minimum of $300 to $500 a month in downtown businesses. I use Purebred Coffee as my office. I'm there every single day. I know a single mom that works at Sweeney Todd that uses the lot behind there that couldn't afford $300 extra a month for a spot, but that's where she parks. And I think that listening to the way it was worded, and maybe I'm mistaken, but the way it was worded, I believe you had said a monthly fee, but earlier he said it was a yearly fee.
It's a gross $300 annual fee, but
when you were
$25 a
mentioning,
month.
you mentioned monthly fee, and I wonder if it was presented to people as a monthly fee, where they think they can pay $25 a month, but then all of a sudden they realize they have to come up with $300 up front. So I think that would have to be clarified also, if people think, oh, I can manage $25 a month, but many of them couldn't manage $300 up front. But there's just so many people that use these downtown businesses and use these lots. I've paid for 2-3 hours in the Cherry Street lot when there's no spots open. But I think there's so much to consider before moving forward in this placard program. I mean, there are, like I said, a lot of residents on Cherry Street that really rely on that lot on weekends and that would have nowhere to park and nowhere to go during the farmer's market. There are many times that Cherry Street is closed, and that would affect that. And then again, behind Purebred and stuff, it's already, tough to get a spot sometimes even without this going on. Because there's a lot of people that use Trojan City Music that go there. Many people I know that use Purebred as an office. We spend quite a bit of money there. It just seems to me like this would really be hurting my ability to use downtown more than helping it. So,
I think some of the study information, I think, as Mr. Titterington intimated, that this is a time, the next year-ish, year and a half-ish, to study the things that will be occurring out of this, if it is implemented. So
you're going to have a lot of spaces that are going to sit empty a lot. And that, to me, seems like a waste. If someone buys a space and only uses it on weekends or something, then you have all these spaces where people could be parking to use downtown businesses that can't because they're sitting empty. Someone who buys a space who goes to work at 6 in the morning, comes home at 6 at night, there's a space sitting open all day that could be used for someone that's not going to be used. To me, it just really does seem like we're going to see a lot of empty spaces that could be used for people to come downtown and shop.
True, but this is to get those spaces open on the street. Folks that are kind of cheating, if you will, and using street spaces to get them into a spot where those spaces are open more on the street. That's one of the benefits behind this that I'm seeing.
I believe you're going to drive people that are using those lots into the street, space hopping a lot more, to be honest.
Could be. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Woodruff. I'm the owner of Pachamama Market at 116 South Market. Speaking to the amnesty program, my concern is what impression we're giving our visitors and what kind of hospitality we're practicing. I don't think it's addressing the problem, which is the fact that 2 hours is not enough time for people to come enjoy our downtown. I've had a lot of customers who have come to my store, visited several of my neighbors, gone and enjoyed lunch, and they've had so much fun enjoying our beautiful downtown that they've lost track of time and come back to their cars to find a parking ticket. Even if they come back to find a note saying, hey, we noticed you haven't received a parking ticket from here before, we're going to put an onus on you to prove that you spent money here. I still don't think that's practicing good hospitality. I think we're not welcoming visitors if we're still putting a burden on them to prove that they spent money to mail in a parking ticket. I think we've already discussed the fact that most of our customers don't take paper receipts anymore. I would not feel comfortable mailing in my credit card statement to a police station or to anybody else. So as a business owner, I don't think that that's the impression that we want to give to our guests from out of town.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Allison Follenkamp, 123 South Market. I'm the owner of Samos Reme. And so half of my clientele come from probably 30 minutes away. We are very much a destination business and pull people from Athens to Indianapolis, Kentucky to Cleveland. And so those people come, they spend the day here. They come, they spend hours talking about their questions about cloth diapers and getting fit for baby carriers. They spend that time feeding their babies, changing their babies. They could spend 3 hours in my store before they ever even leave to go check out the rest of downtown Troy. They need to feed their kids. Sometimes they bring things and they're doing that in my shop, but usually when they make a destination run like this, they're coming with friends and they want to go walk around. Multiple times I've kept people's keys so that I can move their cars, space hopping. That's not always the best. I mean, we get really, really busy, and so sometimes I'm trying to keep track and setting timers on my car or on my phone. But as I've been in this location 8.5 years, and when I moved in, we didn't have near the amount of businesses downtown Troy that we do now. So people are thrilled to come, and we have great places to eat and great places to shop, and they take their little kids and they take their friends and they go around town and they check it out, and it might be hours before they see them come back. So that's my testimony to, we do need to be hospitable and open to them. When you've got a family trying to buckle kids in and get kids unbuckled, they're not going to buckle them in to move them to spaces or drive to a different spot in town. They're just going to go home because it's so much work to bundle the kids up, put them in, get them where they need to go, grab all of their gear and do that. So I've seen that happen. The amnesty idea is good in theory, but I agree, especially with what Lindsay said about the open hospitality. I think that if we can really encourage workers and residents to not park, especially in the quadrants, and it's my feeling that all businesses should have that as part of their employee handbook, that you do not park here, because that's taking away spaces from our customers, that would help. But I'm ambivalent about the amnesty program, and so it's not high on my list of priorities. We need more time on our block. In fact, I don't need, we have no parking issue on that block of South Market. So there are always parking spaces to be had, even during Strawberry Festival. It's constantly changing, and people can pretty much park wherever they want there as long as they drive in and check it out. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have any comments?
Name's Noah Walkup. My wife owns Purebred Coffee, 110 East Main Street. I'm just her employee. No, we own it together.
Aren't we all?
I don't think we have a parking issue, in my opinion, because we kind of have it pretty nice right now with the Walnut Street parking lot. But I do want to give a perspective because I think we have seen the best of both worlds. We do have the parking lot behind us that's been very convenient. The city had it finished and striped right before we opened, so it was perfect timing, and our customers can park there without having to worry about the 2-hour limit. But we also have the 2-hour limit out front. And so what we see is we see both sides. We have customers that come in that know about the back parking lot. They'll be in there like Mr. Kemper all day long, and we cannot get rid of them, using up our Wi-Fi. But on the flip side, out front, the 2-hour space, we do have customers that come out of town that do park there. When they see the signs or we tell them, hey, it's 2-hour limit, all we see them do is move over another space. They just hop over. So I don't think we're with the 2-hour limit, we're freeing up spaces. Our customers are there anyway. They're staying, and we just educate them about the back. So from our perspective, we've seen both sides. It is an issue. We have an issue. My question would be, are we going to enforce the other things that we've talked about? Because what we also see in the back parking lot is that the police parking, there can be up to 5 to 6 officer vehicles in the public space back there on any given time. And we also have vehicles that stay there for 72 hours or longer, sometimes weeks at a time, and not move. There's an orange Dodge Neon that's owned by a family member of mine that has not moved for a long time, and he is a downtown resident. And we also have seen other business owners who park out front of their business in the 2-hour space, and the parking patrol officer does not ticket certain vehicles if they know who they are. When we were doing our build-out process, they were kind enough to come in and talk to us and tell us it's okay, but we see other business owners that are our neighbors that are out there for long periods of time. So my question would be, are we going to enforce the ordinances we already have in place if we do segregate and block off the parking?
I'm going to address that just as my personal opinion, and then I'm going to let the guys that do enforce it.
Yeah.
And, because I'm a retired police officer also, but fairly and justly should be the standard for everyone. So I agree with you. But Mr. Titterington or Captain Long, I mean, these are probably things that you're unaware of.
Yeah, as far as the long-term parking, that has been an issue that's cropped up. We do need to continue to address our signage and make it clear for people. I'm not sure what to infer from the orange neon discussion, being a relative, if you like that relative or not.
Some days not.
Since it seemed like you just threw them under the bus, but we are working on that to clarify it. It happens every once in a while. As far as police goes, they know where they're supposed to park and where they're not. Hopefully, if they are moving into the public spaces, it's because something short-term happened in the other spaces. And since they've got shift change and, there are a lot of spaces that need to be dedicated to police because of that shift change and the fact that we park our cruisers out there plus their personal vehicles. But we try to manage that, and we will remind the chief about that as well. There was one more that you brought up that escapes me right now.
Those were the two main. The last question I have is this a long-term solution or is this a short-term solution in the whole parking lot?
This is a brand-new solution, so we don't even know, we say that there are 70 spots. That's the maximum that we wanted to dedicate to this so that we could keep a number of public spaces that can have turnover that wouldn't be reserved and taken away from public parking off-street. Our new wayfinding will be pointing people towards the parking lots to try to get them off of the streets if they don't need to be on the streets. This is a work in progress. It's a brand-new program. We're not aware of anybody, the amnesty is something new here in Ohio. The placard program, we don't have a lot of experience with other communities. We don't know how much demand there's going to be. What we do know is that we don't want to pull the trigger on everything all at once. For example, we can, I apologize, I will never be able to pronounce the name of the business of the lady that just came up. But knowing that her, the S business is a block away from the primary, and so we continue to evaluate which spots should be timed and which ones might not be able to. If we in fact do implement a placard program, as we said in the memo, we don't want to do anything to the fines. The fines, if everything worked perfectly, the fine incentive would be really focused more on the quads themselves, which we do want to encourage a lot of turnover, those that are right around the square. And so the focus could be just on that, but you need to have the carrot and the stick if you're going to do that. But we're deferring the stick until we can see how successful the placard program is, because we don't want to implement it all at once, change the times, for example, and then find that it's not working and have to say, well, never mind, we need to go back to the 2 hours. So we don't want to do too much at one time. It's going to be a work in progress.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the Miss Nicole and the Troy Main Street coming and voicing for the business owners and the council for hearing us out. It shows a great respect for community here in the city of Troy, so thank you.
Well, thank you very much for coming. I want to make a point to all the business owners that are here today and folks that are in the general public that I'm not aware of. That's what these committee meetings are all about, is for your input. And we rarely get folks show up here for these meetings. So I highly encourage you folks out there to spread the word, and then the folks that may watch this online to please come and visit us and express your opinion, because it does matter. So any other comments off of these 2 items or 3 items that we've been discussing here, the placard, the amnesty, and the fine increase? Okay, do we want to move along to the next item, or do we want to deal with this one at this point?
This is its own item, so I think we've covered everything with the parking changes, and so we're looking for a recommendation to council.
Gentlemen, I, excuse me, just ask each of you independently about your opinion of continuing this, because there's a lot of information that came to us. We're not under any time frame or timeline to deal with this in a hurried manner.
No, sir.
Okay. At this point, my suggestion is to the committee that we digest the information that has come into us this evening, primarily from Troy Main Street. I would like to also see the policies behind some of this information on the placard and the amnesty program that I queried Mr. Davis about some fine line stuff, just to answer some questions for me in my head about the implementation or administration of these things, because I think I'm going to spur more questions off of myself. I would like to see that. Yeah. And that we come back in 2 weeks, Mrs. Baker, if you would assign us again to come back with this and provide this information also to the other councilmen so that they can digest it. That would be my recommendation.
Can't promise 2 weeks since it's going to be busy, but
Okay.
in that area, we'll try to
It's
assign
30, a month? I mean,
whenever, sure.
I mean, we're open.
We'll try to work it in so that
That's
we
okay
still
with
have
you two gentlemen?
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think the most valuable thing that I would like to hear is from the business owners out there, because you're the ones that are being affected most by these changes. You know much more intimately what happens down there than any of us do. So please continue to reach out to us and the other business owners that are around you, ask them as well. I'll try to get out and visit some people just to gather more information, but that's who I think is the most important segment to hear from.
And if you would, email, call, I mean, you've got all of our information. It's online at the city website, so please reach out to us with anything else that you have. But so within 30 days at staff's discretion here to get the questions answered or whatever the timeline is that benefits you. Okay? Sounds good. All right, any other items to become before the Streets and Sidewalks Committee?
Yes.
Yeah, we've met several other times.
Moving on to item number 2.
Might want to give them a second to clear out.
Yeah.
if they'd like to.
If you folks want to, don't want to stick around for the other mundane stuff, please take your leave now. Escape while you can.
Huh? It's okay, he'll just say, yep, yep. Just start your head shake. So we can just breeze through this.
Yeah, this one's gonna be fast. Adriana, this one's gonna be quick, okay?
Your dad like totally.
It's as quick as you want.
I'm doing it.
Take them all three at the same time if you want. Committees, huh?
Are you gonna go to the bathroom? Adriana, there and back. Thank you.
All right, moving along. Bidding authorization, is that the next item that we're going to deal with? Okay.
For the sidewalk repair,
Mrs. Rhodes, you have the
2018
floor.
sidewalk repair program, phase 11. So we are asking for council to authorize Director of Public Service and Safety to allow us to bid and enter into an agreement for a cost not to exceed $350,000 for sidewalk phase 11, 2018 program. This program is just continuing southeast corner. We have a couple more phases after this. The program originally started close to 2000 in the Westbrook area. It has been lagging on, but we continue to chomp away at it. $350,000 is about 92 parcels. 92 parcels total in phase 11. 68 of the parcels did not get permit, so we are doing 68 of the parcels work. Also in that is the Elks right here. They were a couple of years ago in the program, and they asked us to provide them time to be able to fundraise and things like that, and it just didn't come through. I don't think they were able to, maybe, I don't know their financial situation, but maybe not to get the whole amount, so they asked us to actually perform the work. So the $350,000 is actually over the budgeted amount this year, but it is largely due to the Elks. So, and the program will work similar to the other programs. When we're done with the project, they'll be billed, they'll have the ability to pay part or all of it. If they don't, it'll be assessed to their property taxes on 5 years, so, in 10 equal installment increments. So, are there any questions?
I have none, gentlemen.
No. I think so.
All right. Any questions from the audience? Any other council folks have any items or concerns about this? Gentlemen, your decision on this one?
Let's move forward.
Move forward.
Uh,
No emergency.
No. Are we having a technical difficulty? Okay. It's unanimous with the committee that will
Okay.
proceed as staff has recommended on that one. Moving along to the Hobart Arena parking lot.
Hobart Arena parking lot. We're requesting that council authorize Director of Public Service and Safety to advertise and enter into a contract for the Hobart Arena parking lot improvements at a cost not to exceed $1.5 million. As you guys know, we renovated the arena a couple years ago. At that point, there was not fees in there to actually do this overlay, but an overlay of the side of the parking lot is not sufficient. If you guys are out there at any point, there's just no drainage. There's no stormwater, there's no catch basins, there's no inlet, anything like that. So last year, we actually budgeted this in 2017. We thought that we would just be able to maybe we were gonna kind of just do it a little bit. And so we actually decided in 2018, that's probably not the long-term solution for this parking lot. It's a very large parking lot, larger than what I was originally thinking. And so we are over budget, over estimate by $1 million. Because our outlet, Our outlet, we originally thought we were going to be able to go right across the street to Adams Street. We thought that we knew that there was an outlet there, but it can't drain the whole parking lot. So we're going outletting to where the pool and the stadium come out kind of together. So it's a pretty long run of pipe. The design is better than what we have now. We'll have catch basins. It will not capture the 10, the 20-year flow that we were hoping, just because we don't have the amount of fall, stormwater, it's yada, 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 as Tom Funderburg always, you guys don't want to hear the details. But we are not asking for emergency. It's just a lot. And then we would be overlaying the aquatic park parking lot as well as that entrance, the shared use entrance between the stadium and the aquatic park. And then I think we're gaining about 50 spaces. And we kind of did a little bit of redesign on the layout of the parking lot as part of this overlay, kind of cleaning some edges up and then again making the flow. The other large thing that I should note is that right now we have speed bumps there because a lot of people short circuit getting out, say kids after school, but they just, whenever Hobart Arena is or isn't high traffic volume time, they short circuit going right up against the arena to go on and get out onto Adams Street. We're actually making the flow so that when they come in, if they come in off of Adams Street, they have to go down or I'd say to the southernmost part of the parking lot and then go back up. So there'll be a walk path that goes directly right to the middle of the arena. And so we've got all kinds of things going on, don't we? And, yeah, so that it stops the short circuiting and hopes to help the flow of the traffic. So any questions?
So by the addition of the parking spaces, are we doing away with those grass islands out there? Are we going over the entire lot?
It's actually, the grass island's actually being moved and reshaped because we wanted to keep that to allow, there's some utilities in there.
Oh, okay.
As well as we wanted to keep that like for a little bit of drainage area. But the majority, the reason we are so far over budget, I was envisioning that we could just overlay this. Well, once you put catch basins in, you have to drain to the catch basin, so you're pretty much reconstructing full depth asphalt because we're adding a little bit of depth so that things are flowing to the catch basins.
Gotcha. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sure. Just to fill in a couple of blanks, I don't know that you mentioned one part, Jill, but you just mentioned the fact that originally we thought that we could just get by with an overlay, a top coat overlay. And in fact, after the engineers came in and looked at it, there are spots of deterioration, so we do need to go down to the base to do this. Jill mentioned the stormwater. One of the side effects of not having the stormwater for so many years, and I'm reading this text from Mr. Seiler, who is in the audience, that the parking lot was redone in the 70s or the 80s. That was the last time it was done, and it was done over gravel. So it hasn't been done in a long, long time. So it's long overdue. The fact that there was no storm drainage, to take the water away, and when you have the freeze-thaw cycle that only accelerates the deterioration, that's a significant issue. As Jill mentioned, we are looking at the entire area, including the aquatic park, since we are moving the drainage out. And I don't think you mentioned anything about the lighting. We're adding lighting to the parking lot as well, which is a new benefit. It's something that we don't have. We have no lighting out there right now.
When they actually did the analysis of the lighting, I said, well, I don't know if I want to go that, we don't want to increase lighting too much to there's a lot of dark spots, there's not a lot of lighting out there. I was like, okay, we'll go what you recommend from a parking lot standpoint, safety.
And so before you get into your discussion, the 1.5 million either will be, may be a year-end reappropriation, it may be a 2019 budget allocation, depending on how the timing works, but one way or the other, that part would be taken taken into account with the city auditor.
Yeah, I was just rereading the short report here in background, and I don't see anywhere in here with lighting.
In the addition of parking lot lighting. It's in the second paragraph.
Background, the very last three words,
Got it.
parking lot
Oh, got it.
lighting.
Duh, okay. That, to me, that downtown light pollution, I mean, you know, we've got so much light downtown, and I know that we want to try to keep things safe as we can, but I would sincerely like to not add to the light pollution that we have. It's just a comment. Doesn't have anything to do with it.
And I guess the counter argument would be that a couple decades ago almost now, we were having some issues with the crossing of the streets, and so we corrected that. We think we corrected that by including that wall and that fencing there. So we're trying to funnel people out there. We use the decorative lighting along Adams Street and continued that to try to improve it.
Fences and the low level.
We do as well, and so the only area where it is nearly pitch black is the parking lot itself, and since it is such a significant space, and concerts in particular, as well as most of the events are either very early in the morning or late at night when it's dark, even in the summertime, and so that was a safety issue.
Right.
We can look at, as part of the talking with the contractor, shielding the lights so that they're focused only on the parking lot. These won't be stadium sized lighting, so hopefully we can keep the lighting contained to the parking lot.
And also, are we having to do any heavier duty construction on the base in and around the Hobart building and the pool because of the heavy truck traffic that we get there with the concerts and other things coming in?
Yeah, so we're bidding a base alternate of what they call is full depth reclamation. So it's actually where they put cement to the base material and then they build it up. So that'll be plenty strong. That actually keeps the material on site and doesn't have them have to haul out all the asphalt and then haul in all new asphalt. Well, they would be bringing in new asphalt, but they'd use the existing asphalt, they'd grind it up, and they'd use it as the base. So that's what I'm hoping. That'll be one of the bid alternatives. And then the other alternative will be full depth reconstruction. We feel pretty confident with the cross-section because it's similar to, say, a collector street in the city. So I don't think trucks are getting crazy in there. There's just trucks that come in there to unload and things like that.
Gentlemen, any questions?
I don't think I have any.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any, Mr. Twist, I see, has a question in the back.
Hey, what's going on? Mr. Twist here. Just a quick question. I just wanted to make sure, since we're doing such big paving there, there's no other under-the-road work that needs to be done for the pool or Hobart Arena or any plumbing, water, any of those other issues that we might be able to do now before we repave a really nice, huge area.
So there's not a lot of utilities under there.
Utilities.
There's the raw water main from one of our wells that's over in Community Park, but
It's in good shape?
yep, it's in good shape at this point. It's old, but it's in good shape and we don't have any issues, so, yeah. And a couple years ago, I think DP&L came in and they kind of made a primary feed, did some work. They kind of gave Hobart Arena, I think, like 2 primaries, or there's some switch there or something. They did some work out there. So there's not a lot of utilities. That's one of the reasons this full depth reclamation, like I said, is literally a grinder coming in, and it's kind of a neat technology, and so hopefully it works out there. One of the reasons it could work is because of the lack of utilities underneath. They have to work around.
Thank you. Anyone else? What is your
Let's move forward.
Yeah, move forward.
unanimous committee to move forward as staff is recommending with potential reappropriation later stuff? Thank you. Next.
You give me one more time. You just can't get rid of me that easily. Okay.
Executing easements.
So the Troy Recreational Trail Resurfacing Project. So we applied several years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, for TE, I think it's Transportation TA Enhancement, Transportation Enhancement funds through MVRPC. It is federal, state funding that comes out through ODOT.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was like, oh.
You got shushed.
I did, but that's okay.
Not you.
So we are asking the council to authorize Director of Public Service and Safety and the the Board of Park Commissioners to execute easements. This is associated with the resurfacing. So when the rec trails were created, it is our understanding that I believe Tim Mercer was in charge of the park department at that point. And so he went out and he got people to agree to give them this property so they could put a rec trail in it. Sounds great. Cut to 20 years later when we want to resurface, and ODOT is very strict into the book and said, you need easements. Even if it's your property, it's not public right of way, you need easements on your property. Or the park board's property. There's a couple other properties, but we're still working through that legal easement, going through the appraisal process, things like that. So this is just to execute the easements associated with the rec trail resurfacing that the property is owned by the city of Troy and or the Board of Park Commissioners. There is not a fee, it would just be, there's not a fee associated with it. And so that's what this is requesting an authorization for.
But what I'm hearing you say, we need to firm up the easements that we don't have in writing, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is, yes, to get documentation.
And how many property owners do we have with that, do you know?
Us and the park board.
Oh, that's it.
It's our
Is what
property.
this is.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes, there are additional property owners. The school, there is a property owner that I think they're going through who is, one of the parties is deceased, and I don't know if there's another, I feel like there's, an MCD.
Okay, gotcha. Gentlemen, I have no questions.
No questions?
Anyone else in the audience have any questions on the Troy Rec Trail Resurfacing Project and easements? Okay, what is your recommendation?
Let's move forward.
Move.
And you're unanimous with the committee to move forward as staff has recommended. And this is not emergency, is that correct? Any other items to come before the Streets and Sidewalks Committee?